Welcome explorers. Today, dive into the thrilling TTP narration of Hunting with Predators by Banancake, a 25-part fan-made saga from the Nature of Predators series by Spacepaladin15 on r/HFY.
Memory transcription subject, Vikri, Venlil volunteer crewman of UNS Cardinal. Date, standardized human time, October 27, 2136, 10 days after the Battle of Earth. The howling persisted for several seconds as everyone's attention turned toward the south. The more I listened, the more my heart raced. I felt a rush to my head as my senses were heightened. Even the humans seemed alert, which only worsened my own response. Their mouths agape slightly and their eyes wide and dilated, scanning the southern horizon with twitchy movements. If the apex predators of this planet were afraid, how much more afraid should I be? See anything? Grant asked. No, but we shouldn't stick around, Reese stated dryly. For once I'm not gonna argue with you, Grant replied, tightening the straps of his pack before reaching down to Querek. Up. Both of you. Reese did the same for me and I climbed into his grasp as he lifted me onto his shoulders. Grant steadied Querek on his pack. You think they'll come after us? Tenga drew in a long breath. Us? Not likely. But them? He gestured to Querek and me. I felt Reese's shoulders rise as he inhaled. The competition just walked onto their turf and they brought funny-smelling, alien cuisine. Did he have to say it like that? Do I smell funny to him? And what exactly are they? Querek asked nervously. Wolves, Grant answered. Large canids. Ones you don't want to meet. They hunt in packs and they have a powerful sense of smell. He opened the bolt on his rifle slightly and peeked inside to ensure a round was chambered before snapping it closed again. 4 shots. Would that be enough to fight off an entire pack? The more we stood around talking about it, the more anxious I got. Why weren't they running? I say we keep going down the mountain, Reese suggested. And go west? We should be running away. Grant said, gesturing to the north, continuing along the foot of the mountain. I fully agreed with a tail flick. No, Tenga interjected. Reese might be onto something. If this bison is here, then there must be flat ground nearby. It could be just over the next ridge. We all looked out west through the trees. The slope continued down into a rocky valley. On the other side was the next ridge, the crest of which had to be miles away. If they follow us, we'll be able to see them coming without all these trees around, Reese added. That's assuming there are grasslands over there, Grant pointed out. Tenga scratched the back of his neck for a moment. Way I see it, if they do follow us, we'll have to make a stand eventually. That's true no matter what direction we go. All right, Grant conceded. We keep going west, pick up the pace a little, and if we find out they're following us, we pick it up some more, Grant suggested. The group nodded in agreement. Tenga gestured to the descent. Lead the way, rifleman. Grant stepped down the slope with heavy strides. The rest filed in. Tenga in the middle, Reese and I at the rear. The humans walked fast, just shy of a jog. The ankle-deep snow was making it difficult to hold their footing on the slope at this pace. I could feel Reese slip occasionally and quickly correct his footing. The way their limbs all worked in tandem with each other always interested me. They were like living gyroscopes, constantly moving their arms to keep their balance centered, even when their steps betrayed them. The trek continued for a while before Grant broke the silence. You know, Lieutenant, if these mystical grasslands really are nearby, we might find the rest of the bison herd there. Tenga observed his surroundings as he answered. I'd rather not kill a bison. We might not get that choice, Grant said, his voice subdued as he exhaled into the cold air. Why not bison? I asked, perplexed. It didn't make any sense. As hungry as they must have been, I was sure they'd take the first thing they could find. Well, for one, bison would be really difficult to take down with just improvised spears. They're too big, we'd have to get in close, Tenga answered. And 2, the reason they're so rare is because of us. He spoke with a tinge of shame. For a moment no one elaborated, so I prodded. What happened? Tenga sighed. This was going to be a long one. A few centuries ago, on this continent, the bison used to be everywhere. My ancestors, the Native Americans, depended heavily on them to survive. Everything they could ever need, food, clothing, shelter, tools, bison could provide all of it. He looked back at me to gauge my expression before continuing. I was fascinated, though I found it barbaric. Wearing another creature's skin, using it to make shelter. Were there just no other options? Tenga turned around once more. It was like that for a long time. Bison would often be killed in droves, but their population was so great that it did little to affect their overall numbers. He inhaled deeply. All of that changed once settlers from the east began expanding to the west. Their numbers only increased with time, and bison hide was a hot commodity. Tenga looked down. And so they hunted them into near extinction and left the natives to starve. Reese finished for him. My blood turned to ice. An entire species nearly hunted into extinction. Just imagining the amount of death that would entail made my stomach twist. Querex's ears were pressed down as he looked back at us. It was clear that the humans didn't enjoy sharing that part of their history, but their honesty was admirable. And now? He asked. Tenga looked up at him. Laws were set that heavily restricted the hunting of bison. Prohibited it altogether in some places, and they were brought back from the verge of extinction. Though to this day, their numbers are only a small fraction of what they used to be. He looked down thoughtfully. Tenga, if there is a herd around, we'd only need one, then we'll never bother them again, Reese said in a hushed tone. Tenga sighed. I know. The hike continued in silence. I wasn't sure what to think. I imagined the ruthless killing of those massive animals. Hundreds, maybe thousands, every day. Not only that but condemning their own kind to starve in the process as well. I could never imagine the humans I knew today doing such a thing. What changed? I had slipped down onto Reese's pack, clinging tight to his shoulders as we continued to descend. Though he was thinning, he was still quite the powerhouse, a lot stockier than the others. I could feel the muscles in his shoulders contracting and releasing as he used his spear to steady himself with each step. There was so much weight to his movements. He was tired. He was hungry. Yet I could feel the determination in his stride. On an alien planet, possibly with wolves on our track, the place I felt safest was on the back of a hungry predator. Those people from centuries ago weren't them. It couldn't be them. Could it? The golden star, Sol, moved higher and higher into the deep blue sky with each passing minute. We crossed the rocky valley and began the ascent up the ridge. To my surprise, their pace didn't falter much, however, their breathing was beginning to quicken. As we climbed higher, the terrain became more and more difficult. The slope on this side of the valley was much steeper than on the other side, and it was wearing the humans down fast. Their pace started to slow, as it became more challenging to find traction on the icy hillside. There was a plus, however. If the wolves did decide to follow us, they'd have to make it up this hill first. As we neared the crest, the number of trees surrounding us waned. Replaced instead by large rocks, scattered about. We reached the top, making the crossing through the valley in just over an hour. The humans set us down and placed their hands on their knees, panting. As he got his breath, Grant looked up. Holy shit! I heard him mutter. Instead of the usual snowy hills and ravines, in front of us was a vast expanse of flat, frozen ground. A whole plateau. With the huge evergreens no longer obscuring my vision, the sky above seemed endless. The warm light of Sol beamed down from behind us, shimmering off of the large, fluffy clouds drifting gently through the sky. It was such a simple scene. A field of pure white beneath an infinite sky, and yet it was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. Reese walked up beside Grant, panting. I believe, that's a round for me. He patted Grant on the back. They all chuckled as they took in the sight. Let's go ahead and try another hail while we're on the high ground, Tenga suggested. Reese once again pulled the radio from his jacket and turned it on. The same loathsome static played from its speakers. Reese took a deep breath. He repeated the same message he had been for days. This is Corporal Reese of the United Earth Defense Corps, broadcasting on open channels. Can anyone read me? A moment of waiting. Nothing. Reese seemed defeated as he began to repeat it once more, but was cut off mid-sentence. A series of distant bangs emanated from the air above us. The distinctive crack of a sonic boom. We all shielded our eyes from the sun as we gazed upward. I could see trails of fire streaking through the sky right over our heads. One large trail followed by a dozen or more smaller ones. Another wreck, Tenga said as he leaned back slightly to get a better look. Shipwrecks had been coming down from orbit periodically since the battle ended. This one looked particularly big. It had to be a Federation ship. The humans didn't possess any ships that size to my knowledge. The wreck burned bright as it passed over us and out toward the west. It sank beneath the horizon, and moments later, a brilliant blue flash that challenged the sun appeared from beyond the skyline. Whatever remained of its drives had detonated on impact. Reese's radio played a fuzzy, low-pitched drone for a couple of seconds as it picked up interference from the blast. We watched in silence as the remaining debris rained down in the distance. The sound from the drive exploding took almost a minute and a half to reach us. By that point, it was little more than a faint pop. A light breeze promptly followed, scattering loose snowflakes into the air around us. There was a subdued terror in the humans' eyes as they watched the scene unfold. The eerie silence continued for a few seconds before Reese spoke up. "How much of Earth do y'all think is still in one piece?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly as he gazed out over the plateau. My heart sank. There was so much worry in his tone. I could tell that he had been putting it out of his mind and focused instead on staying alive. There was no way Earth got out of that battle unscathed. Missiles definitely landed, and he knew it. "Reese, we can't think about that right now," Tenga turned to him. "I can't not think about it anymore, Lieutenant." Reese looked up at him, biting the corner of his mouth. His eyes were glistening. He looked away from Tenga as he pursed his lips. 10 days. He said, staring at the ground. "I know," Tenga replied as he studied his expression, empathy shimmering in his eyes. I was by no means an expert on human facial expressions, but it was plain to see that Reese was stressed. Holding back tides of emotions. "It's just," Reese choked on his words. Tears began forming in his eyes. "I've got," his head snapped away once again. Tenga began approaching him as he tried to finish his sentence. "I've got 2 little girls out there, Lyuda," that was it. Reese's face tensed up as the tears started flowing. Tenga rushed over and buried Reese's head into his shoulder with one arm, spear resting in the other. I could hear Reese's muffled sobbing as he sucked in air through his teeth. Tenga sighed. "I know, soldier." I could tell from the way he said it that he really did know. Tenga had several years on all of us. Both in age and in his military career. I wondered if he also had children. Seeing Reese like that broke my heart in all kinds of places. I'd always seen him as an unstoppable force. An unmoving bulwark in the face of danger. And he was. But I saw now firsthand that the same things that could hurt a Venlil could hurt a human just as much, if not more. The dread of losing a child was more terrifying than the visage of any predator. The embrace continued for a few seconds before Reese spoke up. "I'm sorry, Lieutenant, I just he sniffled. "Don't apologize, Reese," Tenga said, rubbing the back of his head with the side of his fist. Grant walked around behind him and placed a hand on his shoulder, resting the stock of his rifle on the ground. Tenga dropped his spear and held Reese's head in both hands, looking deep into his eyes. "Let that drive you, Reese. We're gonna get out of here. We're gonna get you back to your girls. You hear me?" Reese took a deep breath and nodded as tears streamed off his chin. Good, good. Now focus up, we've got work to do." Tenga stepped away. "I'll carry your big ass out of here if that's what it takes," Grant joked. The two chuckled and hugged, patting each other's backs with meaty thuds. "I'd just break your spine, twig." Reese sniffled some more, wiping the tears from his face. "I just had to get in on this." I charged up and rammed straight into Reese's leg, clinging to him tight around his waist. The predator buckled at my embrace. "Hey! Easy!" he chuckled. He buckled once more as Querek attacked from the other side. Reese laughed. "Y'all are too much." A long moment passed. Are you gonna let me go?" he asked, looking down at us. "No," Querek replied. "You're too precious," I added. The mood was immediately shot down as, once again, howling echoed in the distance behind us. Now I was going to let go of Reese. I froze and listened carefully as the howling continued for several seconds. It was almost impossible to tell exactly how far away they were. The sound resonated through the air so sharply. They could be miles away or stalking us just inside the forest. "Shit, sounds like they are following us," Reese said as he gazed into the trees. "What now? Do we keep running?" I asked. "No," Tenga replied. "They'll just keep tracking us. Unless they find something else. But there isn't exactly a whole lot around. I say we draw them out into the plains." He picked up his spear and dusted the snow off of it. "I think it's time we introduced ourselves."